Um, well, thank you all for being here today. And I'm really excited because this weekend, Michigan voters made history, turning out in massive numbers to cast their ballot at an early voting site. In the first 2 days of statewide early voting, more than 250,000 citizens made their voices heard, a number that far exceeded the expectations of state and local election officials. And while we were surprised by the large turnout, it was a very pleasant surprise. Clerks were well prepared. The processes and systems that they had in place ran smoothly, and overall, Michigan's first day of voting in a general election was a huge success. Precincts all over the state reported strong turnout and enthusiastic voters. So I want to thank the dedicated county and municipal clerks for their excellent work making early voting run so well for hundreds of thousands of voters. This is the very first year in our state's history with in-person early voting, and our bipartisan professional election officials rose to meet the moment. I'm also grateful to the thousands of poll workers, some of whom I got to talk to this weekend, that are all across the state working early voting sites and at the polls on election day. These election workers are the MVPs for democracy, and we're so thankful that they show up and do the work and make sure that every valid vote and only valid votes count. This is the third election with the new in-person early voting option in place statewide. We had our presidential primary in March. We had or in February, we had our August primary. And then the fact that in this November election, 250,000 Michigan citizens voted on the first 2 days alone showed that it's starting to be embraced by citizens all across our state. In the February presidential primary, the total turnout for all 9 days of early voting was 79,000. And for the August primary, we had about 73,000 folks participate in early in-person voting. Before this weekend, the record for the highest early voting turnout in a single day was just over 11,000 voters. And on Saturday, we had more than 145,000 turnout statewide. Just an incredible increase, over 10%, tenfold. And I was able to visit some of these sites around the weekend and was really inspired to see so many excited voters, all who wanted one of our I voted stickers, many of them the werewolf sticker, but all of them really also excited to cast their vote in this historic election. And there's even more good news. As of this morning, more than 1.5 million Michigan voters have submitted their vote from home, their absentee ballot or voting from home. They chose to vote from home and then return their ballot either through the mail, in person, or at a drop box. And that total of 1.5 million really underscores how many citizens are engaged and actively involved in this election and eager to have their voice heard. What that means is nearly a quarter of the state's active registered voters, 24%, have already cast their ballot in this November election. Now I want to break down those numbers just a little bit and talk about some early voting and voting by geography. So Oakland County and Washtenaw County are leading the state. They're the major counties with turnout. Oakland seeing 27.5% of its active registered voters having cast a ballot, and Washtenaw leading the state with 29.7, almost 30% of active registered voters participating in that election, in this election so far. In Detroit, more than 12,000 citizens cast their vote early in person in the first week of early voting here. I was one of them. And meanwhile, more than a fifth of Kent County voters who cast their ballot did so on Saturday and Sunday. That's almost 21,000 votes early. We're seeing interesting trends also by age and gender. While almost 2/3 of Michigan citizens who voted by mail are older than 60, a full 61% of those who early voted so far are under 60, and a large group of those are young voters. 13.5% of early voters are under 30. We continue to see a gap between men and women also participating this early in the election. Of all the votes cast to date in Michigan's elections, 55% are from women and 44% are from men. Today's also the first day that many jurisdictions can begin pre-processing those ballots that were voted at home and then returned either through the mail or at a drop box or through the clerk. When Michigan citizens passed Proposal 2 in 2020, it included an option for clerks to start processing those ballots voted at home before Election Day. Jurisdictions with more than 5,000 residents can have up to 8 days of pre-processing. And every jurisdiction in Michigan has the option for an extra day. So for this election, 245 jurisdictions will start processing those ballots that are received through the mail or at drop boxes or dropped off at election offices before election day. And it's important to remember that although the ballots will be run through the tabulator, results will not be generated or visible until after the polls close at 8 p.m. on election night. Now, there's still plenty of time for Michigan citizens to get out and vote. Early voting sites are open all this week, every day, through Sunday, November 3rd. You can visit michigan.gov/early voting to find all the information you need, including the location of an early voting site and hours of operation in your community. If you still have an absentee ballot and want to vote from home, you can still do that. To avoid potential postal delays, we recommend that you return it to a secure local ballot drop box in your own jurisdiction or hand deliver it to your clerk's office. Now, if you're a military or overseas citizen, the clerk, if you're not voting for military or overseas, the clerk must receive your absentee ballot by 8 p.m. on election day, or else it won't be counted. And polls will be open from Tuesday, November 5th, of course, from 7 to 8 p.m. on election day, which is now the last day to vote in this election. Whatever option you choose to cast your ballot, Michigan elections are safe, secure, and the results will be counted accurately. And you can visit michigan.gov/vote for voting information, facts about our elections, and see your jurisdiction's sample ballot. Now I'm happy to take any questions. Yeah.
At least one clerk in Warren who's opting not to pre-process absentee ballots. I don't know if there are others, but I'm wondering if you think that's a mistake and if it's going to significantly delay election night results.
I would hope every clerk take advantage of every option to ensure efficiency, security, and accuracy when processing and tabulating their votes. We have been in touch with the Warren clerk and offered her any support that she needs to ensure the efficient tabulation and secure tabulation of the votes in her city. I had hoped, and we certainly hope, that she would choose to take advantage of the option to begin pre-processing ballots returned to her through the mail or at a local drop box, like most of the state, prior to election day. I don't, I won't pass comment on the decision that she made, which is within her purview to make. But that said, we'll be there to help Clerk Forlini, as well as Clerk Buffa, to make sure that they have all the resources they need to pre-process and tabulate all ballots as quickly as possible. All that said, I think when it comes to election night, if there is one community that is lagging behind others, and it's Warren, we'll be open about that so that we can make sure everyone knows exactly what's happening as we go through the process. All that to say as well, though, I've met with the Flint City Clerk and many other local clerks in larger communities and jurisdictions around our state, and they do have a very well-organized plan to begin pre-processing those ballots returned through the mail or at drop boxes today or in the near future. I'm very confident in their processes, and so we'll, after the polls close and the returns begin and the unofficial results begin to be known, we'll make sure you all have the information about which communities are at what point in the counting process, so that you'll know what we know as we see the post-election process unfold.
Secretary, you probably could not have predicted that it would be Elon Musk that you would get into a very public debate with regarding misinformation. How concerned are you right now at this stage of the game about misinformation and what's being done to kind of control it?
Well, we're certainly seeing an uptick in people either with sizable influence in platforms like Mr. Musk or others using those platforms to try to sow seeds of doubt and cause suspicion about what is a very secure and transparent process. We hope that in particular, well, I would have hoped that someone as influential as Mr. Musk would use that influence to help spread actual factual information about our elections. We hope others will choose to do that, and some have. But for every citizen, you can go to michigan.gov/election facts to see all potential conspiracy theories put to rest through the facts and the details of what we do to protect the security of our elections, and really encourage all citizens to seek out multiple and trusted sources of information, and also to be prepared for an uptick in misinformation and confusing statements and allegations to occur in the days ahead.
If I may,
Yeah.
I know you want to stay above the fray on this, but is this, as we talk about elections being as secure as they ever have, more options than we ever have had, are you disappointed that we're still in, in the doubt category here and what's being done? Is this a low point in that regard, in regard to how it's being played? If you understand the gist of the question.
In terms of people still casting stones of doubt around
Correct.
our election.
And the attacks that they're taking on it for political gain.
Yeah, it's really disappointing, and frankly, says more to me about the person throwing the stones than the system itself. That anyone would intentionally try to cast seeds of doubt in the minds of citizens about the sanctity of our elections to further their own political agenda, or to just uh, uh, sow seeds of mistrust in government in general. It's really disappointing. But what I've also seen over the last several years as it's unfolded, not just in Michigan but nationwide, is the response of many citizens are fooled by the misinformation. But I've seen far more citizens enraged by it, honestly, and more focused than ever before in trying to not just help us debunk it and spread truthful information, but also being a part of the process as well. When I traveled around the state this weekend, from Grand Rapids to Pontiac to Flint, I saw election workers who showed up because they had a job to do, and that job was to protect democracy. And that level of emboldened enthusiasm and determination I had not seen before. This uptick of attacks on the system itself. So I think it's really both disappointing and also heartening and inspiring to me to see the resilience of the system and the people in it in moments like this, and in moments like what we've endured over the last several years. And that's what gives me hope that we'll emerge from the other side of this moment, whenever that comes, with a more resilient and healthier democracy than we had going in.
Follow one more up, and then I'll be done for myself. Appreciating we're a week away.
Yeah.
Are we on track in your estimation for record turnout? And I'm curious, on election night, once the polls close, we talked about Warren. Are we expecting it's going to be the next day? Do you think election night will have a good indication of which way the state's going? Just curious your thoughts, where you sit.
Yeah, a couple things. One, in 2020, it was a close election, and we knew within 24 hours of the polls closing on late in the day on Wednesday what the unofficial results were. And so that's my rubric. We know in 2020 we had 2/3 of our citizens voting from home, and we know clerks couldn't begin processing those ballots until election day. And we also know it was our highest turnout ever in state history. With all of those factors and a global pandemic, we had our results within 24 hours of the polls closing. So based on that, I know we'll at least have it by then this time, right? We have a number of other factors in our favor, most significantly the fact that pre-processing starts today, not on Tuesday, November 5th. I anticipate many communities will be, probably most of our communities will be finished tabulating all of their ballots on election night. There's a few variables there that could impact that, most significantly the number of ballots that come in close to 8 p.m., because when a ballot is dropped off close to 8 p.m., it still counts. As long as it's before 8 p.m., but it still has to go through a rigorous security check, pre-processing, before it's even tabulated, and that can take time. And if there are thousands of those that come in after 4 o'clock, let's say, that could delay the results, for lack of a better word, or could extend the period of counting post that 8 p.m. Closure of the polls. So that's one of the biggest variables that's outstanding. What we know is that also more ballots are being returned early than at this time in 2020. And now with those ballots being able to be pre-processed now, that gives me a lot of optimism that we could have results sooner than end of the day on Wednesday. But we're anticipating sometime between when the polls close and end of the day on Wednesday will be when we see the full unofficial results. The other variable that will affect that, of course, the closeness of the races. And if races are particularly close, there may be recounts and other things that unfold in the days that follow that keep us in the unknown column. And so we'll see how all those things unfold. But that said, we'll, after the polls close, hold a press conference, let you all know what we're seeing, what we expect, and give you some more details at that point. The last thing I'll say on that, for citizens who want those results in as soon as possible, get your ballots in now, because again, if you wait until 7:30 p.m. to return your ballot, that is one of the most significant factors that can extend the time between when the polls close and when those unofficial results are known.
Oh, go ahead, Lauren. I can go ahead.
All right, Lauren.
Okay. Another conversation I'm constantly hearing is that, are you anticipating any challenges? A lot of people have the visual of, several elections ago when people were banging on the doors and the windows and there was a lot of intimidation. Are you anticipating that again, or any sort of challenges? as I go out and I talk to people as well, they're like, what if this happens again?
Yeah. We hope for the best, but plan for every contingency. In fact, after our conversation here today, I'm going to be heading to Huntington Place to do a walkthrough of the plans in Detroit for the absentee counting board. So yes, we are working with MSP and the Attorney General's office, as well as the Detroit Police Department and many others, and the Detroit City Clerk, to be prepared for anything and to protect our election workers. I'm glad we have more laws than we had in the past to make it clear it's a crime if you threaten an election worker in their line of work. We also want to continue encouraging transparency. So we invite observers from both parties to watch and observe within the confines of the law. So we'll be monitoring all those pieces. I was in Flint and a few other places, Muskegon, to just look at how their plans are and do a similar walkthrough and assessment. Overall, I'm optimistic and hopeful that people will understand there's no upside to disrupting our elections. We have security provisions in place to make sure we protect our workers and we protect the votes of every Michigan citizen. We saw those security protections ultimately prevail in 2020, and I'm optimistic, of course, that they will again this time. And that's why we hope people will just simply choose not to disrupt the process and allow the voices of Michigan citizens to be heard. Yeah.
Secretary, I have a question from a local voter that reached out to me this morning. It's an interesting question. I haven't heard of this before. They recently voted absentee in one of our cities, and they said that they got a call from San Jose saying that their ballot was voided. So they went to their city hall, and their city hall said that their signature didn't match the one that the state had on file. And they actually told them it was because their driver's license was renewed in the last year, and it's so small on a new driver's license that this is a problem people are having who just got their driver's license renewed. They had to go through the process again at City Hall, and they were able to vote. But is this a problem that you've seen so far?
Well, we know not with that level of specificity and detail. But what I will say is what that illuminates to me is that clerks are being very rigorous in checking the signatures of the ballots that are sent in, and they should. We want to make sure that's the ID check. That's how we ID and validate to ensure that it's a valid ballot and should be tabulated, cast by an eligible voter. So what that story illustrates to me is the rigorous signature check that's in place, and that the clerk did what they're supposed to do, which is contact the voter and give them an opportunity to cure it and make sure their ballot is counted.
I have one more question because this voter asked me to ask it.
Mhm.
Their worry is, what about people who don't answer that call from San Jose?
Yeah.
Because we are getting so many phone calls right now. What would you want voters to know? Because they said they got a couple and they were blocking it, thinking it was spam.
Well, a couple of things. One, you can go to michigan.gov to check if you're voting from home and you're returning your ballot through the mail, you should go to michigan.gov/vote to confirm that your ballot was received. And if you have any questions, contact your clerk proactively to just confirm that it was validated and counted. Everyone can do that. And certainly also clerks will reach out directly to voters if there is an issue. And so on that note, also, be open to hearing from your clerk if they do contact you with any sort of question. Many clerks will try not just calling but emailing if they have other information about the voter. So we know democracy is a team sport, and we need to work together, especially if you're voting from home in that way. And michigan.gov/vote can be a great starting point to just confirm that your ballot was received and counted. Or if you see anything awry, contact your clerk to find out what's wrong. Okay. Yeah.
Secretary Benson, I've heard reports of long lines at the early voting sites this weekend, 2 hours in Rochester, an hour in Southfield. Did you hear from any local clerks that voters were leaving those lines and not able to vote early as they had hoped to?
No, people who showed up the first day of voting were probably so excited that they showed up as soon as they could to vote early that I don't think they would leave. I didn't hear any reports of people leaving. So it's strange because oftentimes long lines on election day are something we want to avoid, and that's why we encourage people to vote early. Long lines the first day of early voting, which I saw personally every single early voting site I went to in Ann Arbor, in Pontiac, in Flint, and in Grand Rapids yesterday. All throughout the day were really almost celebratory lines. There were people who were so excited to cast their ballot in this election that they were happy to wait. They were happy to talk amongst each other and sort of celebrate the moment of being part of a historic day for our state as well. And so it's a very different dynamic than on the last day of voting, where there's more anxiety and people have limited time.
follow-up, do you expect the lines to be shorter in the subsequent days of early voting?
We'll see if the line. I mean, yes, we saw 145,000 people participated on Saturday. 105,000 citizens voted on Sunday. So we may see a dip throughout the week. We may see an uptick again next weekend. So we'll see. I mean, this is one of the benefits, I guess you could say, of data collection in this very first presidential election with early voting in place. We're seeing just how enthusiastic citizens are. I actually think we'll probably potentially see longer lines on Saturday and Sunday, because what we observed in early voting in February and in August was the last 2 days of early voting were the highest turnout days. And what this may also predicate or suggest is we'll also see a lot of turnout on the last day of voting as well. So all of that will be ready as it unfolds. And I think our clerks, what we saw on election day is how our clerks met that moment, that even with the long lines, people went through efficiently. The process went well. People were joyful in casting their ballots, however they were choosing to vote. And so I think we'll continue to see that play out throughout the days ahead.
So it's been noted that there's been issues with the programming of the bats, with specifically
Yes.
from Dominion. Why was that only caught in the past few days, and why can't it be fixed? I saw the release.
Yeah, this is a nationwide issue with Dominion voter access terminals in the counties that use them. And the voter access terminals, of course, not all the machines, just the ones that are accessible, have an issue with the straight party voting and a programming issue that's again affected the machines nationwide. And I think all of us that use Dominion machines were unhappy to learn about this during the testing period and as early voting began. So we're working with Dominion to seek accountability on that front, and also are working with our clerks to ensure voters are aware of this programming issue that will require them to ensure they are voting every section on the ballot.
Bigger issue in Michigan because we do allow voters to cross over in ways that a lot of other states don't.
Because we have straight party. It's not struck me as I've talked to my other colleagues in other states. They're just as upset about it as we are. So yeah, or surprised, I think.
We have an online question for you here.
Okay.
Kyle, can you please state your name and organization, please?
Hello,
this is Kyle Lynn, the editor.
Hi, Kyle.
Hey, thanks for taking the question. I appreciate it. I know you addressed the Warren clerk just a minute ago, but are there other municipalities that you are aware of where they are not doing the pre-processing of the absentee ballots?
No.
Just true. Okay, thank you. I have one more question.
Other questions here as we wait for Kyle?
There was one from our user, and
Yeah.
it's out of state, but apparently there's been some fires or
Hmm.
incendiary devices at ballot boxes in Washington and Oregon. Any thought in regard to just overall security of ballots? And
Yeah.
hopefully that doesn't occur here.
Yeah, we're always concerned about the potential of tampering or otherwise just mishandling of the ballot drop boxes. They're checked daily. They're monitored by video cameras, and they're designed in such ways to make it very difficult to put anything but a ballot inside them. So we'll continue to monitor. We also recognize that sometimes folks might do that at one place to create a story and to cause fear or make people afraid to use the drop boxes. And we don't want to amplify unnecessary fears. The drop boxes in Michigan are safe. They're monitored. They're checked every day. And again, you can, once you drop your ballot off, you can call your clerk to make sure it was received. You can go to michigan.gov/vote to confirm it was received. And there's a number of other ways to make sure that you can be vigilant in ensuring your ballot is ultimately counted. How many drop boxes?
Yeah.
There's one for every 15,000 citizens in our state.
Thank you.
Yes.
Could you speak to the importance of the bottom of the ballot locally for
Yeah.
people who are in Michigan? 'Cause a lot of times people vote the top president and they forget all about the
Yeah,
local
one of the reasons I actually think we're seeing long lines, one of the reasons that I've seen across the state is that these ballots are long and they're 2 pages. And so people are taking their time with them if they choose. I know even when I filled out my ballot at the early voting center right here in Detroit, and it took me a while to just work through and make sure I was participating in every part of the ballot that I could. So all that to say is we want people to be careful and thoughtful and informed and engaged as they fill out their ballot, do their research ahead of time. It's one of the reasons that voting from home can be very helpful as well, because you can take as much time as you need and then return your ballot at your convenience. So all of those things we want voters to be mindful of. We know there are a few races like the presidential, like the Senate race, like state house races, like congressional races that are capturing a lot of attention right now. But there are a lot of other important judicial races, school board races, millages, and other things on the ballot in communities around the state that we want people to be thoughtful about and participate in voting as well.
I'm a novice voter, my first couple of times. Does the state provide information or a site where I can go to see who does what as a candidate?
Yeah, vote411.org is a great resource from the League of Women Voters that's set up to help answer questions for candidates or for citizens about the candidates on the ballot and other information. And then at michigan.gov/vote, you can actually get your sample ballot for your jurisdiction so that you can print it out ahead of time and do research, Google all the names, and find out what other additional information you might want to know before filling out your ballot. I see, yeah.
Secretary Benson, I know that Detroit is the only municipality where a voter with an absentee ballot can't go to their polling location on election day and insert it into the tabulator themselves. I don't quite understand why that is, but I'm hoping you might be able to walk us through that.
Well, when the law was passed to make early voting, all the laws were passed by the legislature to make early voting possible. It was decided